Folks, no weapon formed against us shall prosper. That was the spirit with which Mother Emanuel AME Church opened its doors yesterday for the first service since the mass shooting took place last week. It was an emotionally charged day as church members in the city, the nation, continued a painful healing process 4 days after a white gunman's racist rampage left 9 worshipers dead. It was quite the busy weekend, not just when it came to that, but also news over the particular weekend. What we also discovered this weekend is that a racial manifesto, a hateful manifesto by this killer, by this domestic terrorist, purportedly has been found. We're going to detail that later in the show. Also, a state rep in Florida, he has been calling for the Confederate flag to come down, saying that he didn't have the courage to do so. It has also led to Republican candidates twisting into the wind, trying to sort of answer the question as to whether or not it should come down. Also, the judge in South Carolina who initially laid out the charges against Dylan Roth, well, he has been removed from the case by the South Carolina Supreme Court because it was discovered that in his past he actually used the N-word in court and had to apologize as well. So lots of things for us to get to. But first, we want to play some of the sermon that took place at Emanuel AME Church yesterday. A lot of news networks actually took the service live. It was a packed church as folks focused on the deaths of those 9 members of that church in the horrific killing last week in Charleston.
It has been tough. It's been rough. Some of us have been downright angry. But through it all, God has sustained us. The blood of the Mother Emanuel 9 requires us to work until not only justice in this case, but for those who are still living in the margin of life, those who are less fortunate than ourselves, that we stay on the battlefield until there is no more fight to be fought.
Folks, in addition to this, what you also had taking place this week in Charleston, you had a number of people all across Charleston who were gathered there to also protest, to demand unity. There's thousands of people marched across one of the bridges there. Shelley, go to my iPad, please. I want to show you folks this video here that took place there in Charleston yesterday. You will see in this video thousands of folks lining this bridge. And again, they were protesting the Confederate flag. There was a show of unity there, significant numbers of whites as well. I want to come to our panel here. Reverend Jim Wallace, president and founder of Sojourners Magazine. We also have CLEO Manago, behavioral health expert, joining us with us as well. And we have DANIELLE MOODIE-MILLS, who's also on the show as well. And of course, she is chief creative officer of Politini Media and NBC Black contributor. This was, Jim, I want to go to you first. This obviously was the first Sunday for this church after this particular killing. And so many people have been talking about the forgiveness that family members showed in the court hearing. But I think what you still have here, you have people who are still outraged, who are still stunned by what took place and still looking for answers.
While I deeply admire and moved by the calls to forgiveness, white people shouldn't be looking for that. I mean, this kid wasn't born with all this. He was taught it. This sickness, this sin, I call racism America's original sin. This sin still lingers. It's time for white people to look at white culture. White culture. That Confederate flag, I told my son this morning, that's not the flag of the Confederacy. That's a battle flag that was put up in 1962 in direct opposition to the Civil Rights Movement, to integration. That flag is in opposition to racial justice. That Confederate battle flag is an anti-Christian flag. And Christians should say that and bring it down. We've got to talk about America's original sin. How does a 21-year-old kid learn this hate and sickness? Don't push him off as some mentally deranged person here. You know, this was a terrorist act. Black people have faced terror since they arrived in this country, and now not even safe at a Wednesday night prayer meeting in a black church.
It's interesting that you called it that, because over the weekend, the director of the FBI, he was asked about that. And Shelley, I want to play this. This is what he had to say, and it's stunning to me how in America we are afraid to call terrorism when it involves an American citizen. So here's FBI Director Charles Comey. Here you go. So check this out.
Because of the way we define terrorism under the law, right? Terrorism is an act of violence done or threatened to, in order to try to influence a public body or the citizenry. So it's more of a political act. And again, based on what I know so far, I don't see it as a political act. That doesn't.
Now, again, to say somehow it's not terrorism, this is a perfect example of how we want to play games in America. We would, if this took place in any other country, we would call it terrorism. You read the manifesto, it was terrorism. He clearly was targeting a pastor who's an elected official as well. This is domestic terrorism. Just like Timothy McVeigh was domestic terrorism and so many other cases.
But the issue, I think, among others, is the perspective of black people as being disposable. If it's hurting us, then it's not a big deal. It's not domestic terrorism. It's not this horrible thing. It's just one so-called mentally ill person. My concern, which is different than the minister's, is that he talked about white people and what they need to do. Black people need to be more vigilant. We need to be more thoughtful about the fact that we live in a white supremacist society. When that young man walked into that church dressed up too much on a hot day, we should have looked at him sideways. But we're so into being loving, particularly the white folks, frankly, and accepting and being impressed that they're even there, that we don't even vet or investigate the situation. And we constantly are being put in a situation, including with cops and other situations, where we're sitting ducks for some white craziness. And we're not teaching our children that they live in a society where they have to be thoughtful about the situations that they're in. Even the president, when he first started talking about this, he talked about gun control, if I'm not mistaken. He made it seem like it was simply a gun control travesty as opposed to looking at the issue of race, which he finally did later. But initially he, just like this guy from the FBI, is apprehensive to look at the fact that we're looking at racism and the murderous impact of racist attitudes in this country.
That's right.
I don't know anything more political than creating a manifesto. And so when the FBI director comes out and says, well, this is our Webster dictionary version of terrorism, a manifesto that blatantly says these people are not worthy, they need to be wiped from the earth, that's politics right there. That is a threat. And I said this the other day, that if there was one word in there, ISIS, had been anywhere, he would have been on somebody's terror watch list. But because it was targeted towards black people, he was not.
Hold tight 1 second. We come back. We're going to talk to a South Carolina pastor about this issue. We'll bring him to the conversation. Also, Dylan Rolfe had more than 2,000 words as part of his manifesto. We're going to break it down for you as well. Plus, throughout the whole show, we're going to play for you various clips from the sermons of pastors all across America who talked about Charleston in their sermons. And so we're going to start the first one right now. We'll be back on News 1 Now on TV1 in just a moment.
Was because of the color of their skin. Would y'all please tell all of those Republicans running for president they were killed because they were black? To use the language of Ice Cube, their only sin was their skin. I'm trying to let you know that racism is an unresolved issue in these yet-to-be United States of America. It's a stain on the body politic of this nation that continues to expose the hypocrisy of American democracy. I'm trying to let you know this man invaded a sanctuary, and they discovered even in Emmanuel, God with us, there is no sanctuary in a sanctuary for black people in the United States of America. I'm holding on to a twig.
Folks, that was Pastor Frederick Douglass Haynes, Friendship West Baptist Church, again, speaking from the pulpit about the massacre that took place in Charleston last week. And over the weekend, what appears to be the manifesto of the racist terrorist Dylan Rolfe, who massacred the Emanuel 9, was discovered over the weekend. Police have not made it clear if this was absolutely from him, but according to various websites, it included photographs of Rolfe posing with guns and wax figure slaves at a Confederate museum. Among among his rants, he stated that he was not, quote, in the position to alone go into the ghetto and fight, and that he chose Charleston because it was the most historic city in the state of South Carolina, and at one time had the highest ratio of blacks. In addition to this, he also talked about how it was the Trayvon Martin case that caused him to begin to hate blacks and begin to say how he wanted to be able to change America and to literally start a race war. As I said, the police, they have not confirmed that this was indeed written by him, but he read various things from the Conservative Citizens Council, which the Southern Poverty Law Center calls a hate group. On the panel, we have Jim Wallace, president and founder of Sojourners Magazine. Joining us, Melanie Campbell, convener of the Black Women's Roundtable. Also, Dr. CLEO Manago, CEO of Black Men's Xchange. DANIELLE MOODIE-MILLS, Chief Creative Officer of Politini Media. And joining us via Skype from Summerville, South Carolina, is Pastor Abraham Bellinger from First Fruits Community Church. And Pastor, I want to go to you first, because what we saw over the weekend in South Carolina, we saw, even at one point, I'm going to pull the video up in 1 second, of people who were covering up Confederate statues with Black Lives Matter signs. And what was interesting to me is I'm reading newsbusters.org, which the Media Research Council, a conservative outfit, they literally are framing this as these Confederate statues were being defaced, and somehow they were being vandalized, when you had people who were saying that having these kind of symbols is simply promoting a level of race in America. Your thoughts?
Thank you, Roland. I appreciate this opportunity to come straight from the heart of the matter. Yes, you know, the root of the issue is the fact that there's so much embedded hatred within the culture of South Carolina. While we've made great progress already, we have responses as such to try to continue to promote this back and forth between the races. But what we've seen, I believe, over the weekend is a huge symbol of unity, as we've seen both our black and white brothers come together and sisters come together in unity to say, we're not going to have this. No matter what the politicians say, no matter what people that have been taught hate over years, over generations are saying, that we're making a deliberate decision to begin to break down these barriers. So no, there was no defacing of any type of monuments or anything like that. People stood up collectively to say that though we were hit hard, we're coming back stronger with love, and we're coming back with unity. So it's just an amazing feeling, in spite of the tragedy, to see everyone coming together in a collective way to make a huge statement across not just the state of South Carolina, but the world.
Shall I go to my iPad? This is a Vine that was posted of a young man who actually was burning a Confederate flag. He is wearing, actually is a white male, he's wearing a Black Lives Matter shirt and sign. And Pastor, what's interesting about this and other examples, I mean, you saw conscious whites who said, we have to say something and stand up. It can't just be African Americans out here fighting these battles.
Correct. Yeah, our silence is just as bad as anyone that goes and pulls a trigger. I believe in the scriptures that if a man has hate in his heart towards someone, that's murder already. So we, whites, blacks, Mexicans, Koreans, whoever, we all have to collectively speak up in peace, in unity, not in hatred, even though we are emotionally stirred, but we have to continue to come together. Now, we can't just come together for a moment in the season after 2 or 3 weeks are gone. We got to keep this pace up so we can make continued progress, so that we can really see the impact. If we want to see the flag come down, which I saw it come down from the state of the top of the state capitol to the grounds, which to me was much more offensive because you could see it better. But if we want to see that pulled down, we really got to continue to pull down the flags of hatred within the hearts of people that have been taught this over generations of time.
Melanie?
Hi, Roland. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I spent some time down in Charleston on Thursday with a White House delegation, Reverend Tony Lee and Wade Henderson and some of us. And one of the things that was very touching on the point that was made there is there was an Uber driver that drove us around and on Thursday. And one of the things that he said was that he lived in Pennsylvania, had lived in LA, and he moved his family to Charleston, and he lives in North Charleston. And he said, I can tell you racism is alive and well. I've seen a lot of racism in states like Pennsylvania, you know, when you get outside of the urban areas. And he felt that the racism was pretty strong in Charleston. But he also said that this did something to him, that it changed him, and that he realized that he had things going on in his heart and his mind, and that the next day after this happened, that morning, on Thursday morning, he was walking his 3-year-old son, and a young black man walked up to him, and they started a conversation. And he said he realized at that point where he would have been thinking one way about this young man, and this young man was saying, it's really good, man, to see you walking your son and doing that as a father, coming into Father's Day, as we all know. And that he realized that his heart, something about this hit his heart, and it changed him. He just wanted us to know that. It just kind of came out of nowhere in the conversation. And for me, one of the people who passed was one of my classmates, Cynthia, the librarian, actually went to Clark Atlanta University. And so one of the things that we also talked about, what can we all do for these families as we deal with the political realities of having this moment that we can make change? We also need to make sure we take care of these families whose lives have been devastated.
Real quick before I go to break, CLEO, real quick.
I was going to mention to the minister when he was on the air that my concern is that these Black Lives Matters movement, in this society, it's embarrassing to publicly be caught being racist. You're not supposed to say you're racist. And there's people among whites who don't want to be seen as racist, who are joining the Black Lives movement, Black Lives Matter movement, so to do an association so they seem like they're not racist because they don't want to be seen as a bad guy, regardless of how they really feel in their hearts. And my concern is that we get caught up in these social fashion statements that are called racism issues, but we're not dealing with the fundamental problem of white supremacy and its impact on our behavior. Because even this guy, as you mentioned, had this racist perspective of this black man initially that he was living with, and now he apparently has a conundrum. But people default back into white supremacy, and the threats to black lives, and nothing changes, and everything becomes part of a fashion statement.
Hold tight 1 second. We're going to pick up on that when we come back. Also, we'll deal with the issue of the Confederate flag as well. Pastor, I certainly appreciate you joining us. Thank you so very much for being with us, and we'll certainly continue our conversation as well.
That breaks out on the back of my left hand, all right, and that's the only place. I will think that the problem is local, but if I start seeing that rash all over my body, I realize that the problem is not local, it's systemic. Well, what's true of the body is true in society. What took place in Charleston was not local, it was systemic. If someone has a lens that is clouded against you, it doesn't matter what you say, what you do, until they get a new lens. They're going to see you the same way. So America needs to check the lens through which we have been looking at these issues. Because if we don't change our lens, the same things are going to happen.
This is the Confederate flag that flies on the monument on the state grounds right outside the state capitol there in South Carolina. This flag simply is the most racist symbol that has ever been produced by the United States of America. Now, I know some folks will say, well, you have the burning cross and you have the noose, but the reality is this flag is often seen in public. The fact that it is flying on the state capitol says a whole lot about this particular issue. And so we have seen this become an even more heated debate because Dylan Roth actually had a bumper sticker, Confederate flag, on his car when he was arrested. Many of those photos we showed him actually holding a Confederate flag. And for some reason, you have presidential candidates who somehow cannot confront the issue in terms of taking this flag down. This is Mike Huckabee, who is running for president, a Southern Baptist Convention pastor, former governor of Arkansas, yesterday on Meet the Press.
If the state government of South Carolina wishes to address an issue in their state, that's fine. But Chuck, if you can point me to an article and section of the Constitution in which a United States president ought to weigh in on what states use as symbols, then please refresh my memory on that. But for those of us running for president, everyone's being baited with this question as if somehow that has anything to do whatsoever with running for president, and my position is it most certainly does not. They have more diversity in the people that they have elected to statewide office than New York, Connecticut, or Massachusetts. There's 4.8 million people in South Carolina. I don't think you could say that the presence of one lunatic racist who everybody in this country feels contempt for and no one is defending is somehow evidence of the people of South Carolina. I think we've seen the people of South Carolina and their character by what you saw in Charleston with people of all races, Democrats, Republicans, from every perspective, hugging, praying. Nobody was burning down their community. They weren't breaking windows. They weren't beating up on cops. They were exhibiting a true Christian spirit that really is, I think, exemplary to the rest of the country.
Here is Rick Santorum, who often speaks of faith on the campaign trail, also a presidential candidate on ABC's This Week.
What about the Confederate flag? You saw Mitt Romney's tweet, I'm sure, bring down the flag. Jeb Bush has said bring down that flag. Should they bring down that flag?
I take the position that the federal government really has no role in determining what the states are going to do.
You're a candidate for president. Do you not have a position on this at all?
I'm not a South Carolinian, and I think this is a decision.
It's beyond South Carolina.
I would say that these are decisions that should be made by people. You know, I don't think the federal government or federal candidates should be making decisions on everything and opining on everything. This is a decision that needs to be made here in South Carolina. I have, like everybody else, I have my opinion, but I think the opinion of people here in South Carolina and having them work through this difficulty is much more important than politicizing it.
But what is your opinion?
Well, again, it's my opinion is that we should let the people of South Carolina go through the process of making this decision.
Okay.
This was a tweet Mitt Romney sent out over the weekend. Pull it up, please. Okay, Mitt Romney actually commented, two-time presidential candidate. Pull it up, please. Thank you. Take down the Confederate flag at the South Carolina Capitol. To many, it's a symbol of racial hatred. Remove it now to honor Charleston victims. This is President Barack Obama responding on Twitter to that. Good point, Mitt. Reverend Wallace, I heard you over here, and you literally were about to come out your skin listening to Mike Huckabee and Rick Santorum talk.
This is white denial. White denial. Whites want to say this is an incident, individual incident. The white supremacy leads to white privilege. White privilege is a nice way of saying white supremacy. You know, the white denial here has to be confronted not just by black people, but white people say this is denial. Our original sin is white racism. It's got to be named for what it is. Well, it's both. It's both.
It's the protection of whiteness and white power, and keeping everything else at bay and minimizing it, so white people can stay in place and making it not a terrorist act. I mean,
terrorist act.
Because we got to look at the context here. I mean, folks are trying to protect something.
Right.
What are they trying to protect? What are white folks trying to protect by dismissing the humanity of black people?
White privilege and power.
Their power and privilege. That's exactly what they're trying to do.
Can we agree that that's like protecting blood money?
Well, yes. So the unity, racial unity, has not got to be lifted up to say we are one. It's got to say we will attack a criminal justice system that's racialized. We'll attack policing. Voter suppression has to be attacked by racial unity.
But this is the reason why we continue to have these lone wolf conversations.
Right, exactly.
Because it actually dismisses the fact that there is a system of oppression that we have to be deconstructing. When we make this man mentally ill, when we say that he is deranged, we are distancing ourselves, our history, and our understanding of where we are presently from the space that we're in right now. Which is fueled with racism.
No, I would say this. I say anyone who is a racist is mentally ill, right? Because you have to have that's from that point. But the bottom line is, any candidate that says that they don't understand they have a voice in this does not need to be elected president. I'm not saying that the flag itself is a litmus test, but symbols matter. Symbolism matters. The swastika matters, right? When you look at that, so it's a symbol of hatred. So it needs to come down. That's one thing. The other is when you look at what's going on with our institutions down there. Do something that says that you're going to do something about criminal justice. You're going to do something about our HBCUs down there. South Carolina State doesn't need to be having this burden of finances. Do something about that. If you believe that we need to do something about these 9 people who were killed, most of them, over half of them went to HBCUs. Do something about HBCUs. Do something tangible that says you understand systemically that we need to do something about what happened with these murders, other than just say, kumbaya, we're one.
Hold tight 1 second. When we come back, we'll hear from Bishop Harry Jackson. He'll join our panel as well as we continue the conversation about this particular issue. And again, we have pastors around the country who were preaching yesterday about Charleston. And here's one of our pastors before we go to break. This is News One Now on TV1.
We got to carry the torch for Morris Brown that founded the church, for Denmark Vesey that started a slave rebellion from the church, for Martin Luther King that preached at the church, for Clemente Pinckney, for Myra Thompson, for Ethel Lance, for Susie Jackson, for Daniel Simmons, for DePayne Doctor, for Tawanda Sanders, for Cynthia Hurd, for Sharonda Singleton. Somebody holler, they are my brothers, they are my sisters, and though you slay me, we gon' praise him, because if the devil thinks he can kill you from coming to church, he knows he can kill your joy. But is there anybody here that can testify this is the day that the Lord has made?
That went into a white church and killed 9 white Christians, do you think they would have put him in handcuffs? And all the more, do you think he'd be alive to even talk about it? Not only did they not put Dylan Roof in handcuffs, they put a bulletproof vest around him to make sure that he was safe. I don't know where you are in this room, but God sent me to let you know in this place we're living in dangerous times. 2 white men will escape from jail in New York after having intercourse with a staff member, and they can't even find handcuffs to put on them. But Tamir Rice had to wait 5 months just for his body to be released. Where were the handcuffs for me?
Welcome back to News One Now on TV1 for our continuing coverage of the Charleston massacre. Another bit of news, the judge who set the bail for Dylan Roof, he has been removed from the case because he previously had used the N-word during a particular case. This particular judge, I mean, it is stunning, James Gosnell, he made this comment in 2003. He was talking to a black defendant whom he knew. He said that he repeated to the defendant a phrase that he had heard spoken by a black sheriff's deputy. He said, quote, "There are 4 kinds of people in this world: black people, white people, rednecks, and niggers." That's what the judge said in the court. It was investigated. He had to apologize for it. Supreme Court has removed him from the case. We come back with our panel with joined by Bishop Harry Jackson here as well, from Hope Christian here in the D.C. area. Bishop Jackson, I want to go to you first because, again, we talk about the flag, we talk about culture, we talk about what it means. Here is a judge who felt comfortable enough to repeat a story and basically said, well, a black sheriff's deputy told it to me, so, and I'm talking to a black guy, and I know you, so therefore, that pretty much gives me cover.
Well, what we're finding is that in the day of cell phones and cameras, we are seeing things exposed that have been going on for a long time. America has come a long way. We have a long way to go. So right now, our choice is, do we react in a way that is only momentary, or due to we make systemic change? And I think we're going to have to attack some problems. It's going to have to be led by the church. Right now, we need a day when the church cries out. We need to set a date, we need to come together, and we need every church in America to begin to say, we're going to heal the racial divide on our watch. Roland, I believe that in the next 10 to 15 years, and I believe your other guests would agree with me, we can heal this divide if we focus. But if we just keep letting events happen, and then we respond to the event, and then we argue over who's right or wrong about the event, and then we go back to sleep and act like there's no racism in America, there's a real problem with it.
And look, I mean, I'll give you an example. I remember, and we dealt with the idiot on here on the show, Eric Bolling of Fox News, who literally goes on TV and says, there's no racism in America.
Right, and he does that because
and not just him, numerous people, and what he is reinforcing this narrative, and folks are walking around saying, "Hey, there's a black dude in the White House. What you talking about?" And I'm going, just go to the EEOC website and see the litany of cases and settlements. And we can go on and on and on. And then it's this whole deal of, well, you look at what happens when they did a study and they took a black-sounding name and a white-sounding name, the exact same resume, and the black-sounding name got a 50% less chance of getting a call back. So when people say, oh, do right, act right, be respectable, get your education, don't be in trouble, but you still won't get a call back because you have a, quote, black-sounding name. That's institution. Danielle, then CLEO.
But you're absolutely right. The idea is that we look at these things as these events, these one-offs that happen, and they don't want us to put the pieces together of the puzzle and say, wait a minute, it doesn't matter if a black man is in the White House or not. America has a racist history and a racist present, and until we decide to deal with these as a collection, a pattern of racism that we're seeing, then we're not going to have that healing. It's not going to take 15 years, because the first part of it is about consciousness raising, and it's about focus and understanding this is where we are. It's not about the N-word, and it's not about the flag, although the flag is important as a symbol of hatred, but it is this idea that we have in our bones, racism exists, right? White America, it's in the DNA of America.
CLEO.
Sometimes I wonder at this late date if black people are prepared to defend ourselves and resist white supremacy. Because, for example, first of all, Ruth got in the church dressed up like a Nazi already, but he got to the church and we were not vigilant. The other issue, though, is that the forgiveness thing, they started talking about forgiveness immediately. How do you resolve a murderous conflict with an adversary when you're breaking your neck to forgive before the bodies got even cold? We're not preparing ourselves for a war against white supremacy and against the attack on black life in this country. We're preparing to pacify all the time,
Jim,
and we cannot have change like that.
Jim?
Even Father's Day, we talked about Father's Day. Are white fathers ready to confront the fact that every black father in America has had the talk with their son and their daughter, and white fathers have no idea the talk's even going on?
Yeah.
You know, my son, if he was in Sanford, Florida, same time, same place, doing the same thing as Trayvon was doing, the whole nation knows he's coming back to me in joy.
Right.
Trayvon didn't come back. So, you know, we've got to talk about how we deal with the systemic issues here. Racial unity is a wonderful thing if it is aimed at overcoming systemic structural injustice. Otherwise, it keeps this illusion going that we're in a post-racial America.
One second, when we come back, we'll come more with our panel, and we still have more, folks, of our pastors. And I wanted you to hear what was saying from the pulpit. And so these are all black pastors. We're putting the word out for tomorrow because we're going to have an all-white panel of evangelicals. And I want to hear what white pastors had to say about Charleston from the pulpit. And here's Reverend James Meeks from Salem Baptist Church in Chicago on News 1 Now TV1.
Young man was raised in a culture of racism. South Carolina has no business flying the Confederate flag. The Confederacy was born during a time in our nation when there were people who wanted to secede from our country, and they wanted to own slaves. They were in the South. In the North, we said slavery was wrong. We ended up going to war over the issue of slavery. The war is called the Civil War. 500,000 people died. But the question was settled that we would own no slaves in America. I agree with the President of the United States that the Confederate flag does not belong over a state capitol. It belongs in a museum.
Folks, welcome back. CLEO Manago.
We just witnessed an assassination. Senator Reverend Clementa Pinckney was a powerful thinker for black people in this country, let alone in Charleston. So we need to put that in, we need to understand the magnitude of what just happened here, with all this forgiving stuff getting in the way of us understanding what just went down. We also need to understand beyond supporting those families, that we need to support black people. We need to learn how to support each other. We need to have conversations with, not just with white folks, but with each other, because we've been poisoned. We need to unlearn internalized oppression. And I'll just close with this. For example, Darren Wilson, Zimmerman, etc., they got lots of money after they shot these and killed these people. White folks send them all kinds of money. So we have a racism issue in this country that has gotten in the way of us becoming more supportive of each other and having each other's back as a people. We need to have a conversation about that too.
All right, Reverend Wallace.
In John's Gospel, it quotes, Jesus says, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." The only redemption for this suffering and pain that we saw in Charleston is we start talking truthfully about this sickness, this sin of racism in this country. And repentance means more than saying you're sorry. It means turning and going in a whole different direction.
And we can't heal unless we decide to be conscious, unless we wake up and recognize the racism that we are fueling through white supremacy. We have to be conscious in order to heal.
And if we're sorry about racism and we do repent, we got to take specific action. The one place where I see consensus is criminal justice reform, that you can't have a person who made a mistake get labeled for life, excluded from culture, and expect him to be joyous and happy.
Folks, tomorrow on the show, you're going to see something that you probably wouldn't expect. I doubt any other network will actually try to do it. We're going to have a panel of all white evangelicals.